Don't do an interview show because there's so many interview shows. Do a chat show. Definitely don't do a narrative show. Those are extremely expensive. I have a show called Smart Girl Dumb Questions. And I started conceiving of it a couple of years ago when I was executive producing a show with Kara Swisher, who's a longtime podcaster, a former New York Times journalist, and a tech reporter. And I thought what would be different about mine was me admitting what I don't know. I think that we are way more curious than our media or even our conversations reflect as a society.
Right.
And I think a lot of the explosion of explains, like people like Harini Bhatt doing Today I Learned, or Cleo Abram doing Huge If True, or, a lot of these, or Johnny Harris's videos on YouTube. But I have 3 types of guests that work really well. Basically, big names that I'm gonna have a different kind of conversation on. Number 2 is guests who are experts in their field, and they tend to be quite dry and deep, and my format brings out a certain levity in them. And the third is, for me, and one of my favorite categories, if not the favorite, is people who never get an hour to tell their stories. 2 doormen that came on my show, but they're really socially anthropologists. Great interviews or great conversations are kinetic. And they tend to be when people ditch what they've prepared and are just so engrossed in the conversation, surprised, delighted. And you as a host are just the first audience for that conversation.
Right.
That's a way to think about hosting. But I think that you have to experiment, because if you don't experiment, you won't figure out what you like doing, and your audience won't be able to see things that are different.
Hi, my name's Nayeema Raza. I'm a podcaster. I have a show called Smart Girl Dumb Questions. I think we live in a world where we are trained to hide our dumb questions and ask them privately to our phones, and then broadcast our actually dumb opinions. And what I would like is for us to be confident enough to be curious, to ask questions out loud to people, to admit things we don't know. And so the show is called Smart Girl Dumb Questions for that reason. And it's also called that because my amazing friend Teresa Shao, who co-created the show, Aquafina is Nora from Queens, and wrote the film and co-wrote the film Joyride. She actually gave me the name for it. I have this theory because I used to make movies, and then I was a journalist at the New York Times. I was a video journalist, and then I got into podcasting because of the pandemic, and it became really hard to film. And I produced first and then co-hosted, and now I host. But I think that stories just want to be told, and it used to be that you would become really expert in one format, and you still can. There'll be people who make amazing films that they only shoot literally in film, and that will be a craft. But I think if you want to build audiences in this world, the audiences are so fragmented because distribution has become so fragmented that you need to have your product available everywhere. So people need to be able to read a transcript or listen to the conversation in their ears as they run, or watch it if they prefer to watch. And so I just believe in multimodal storytelling, and a video podcast allows you to have all the different elements of that. And then I think as a host or a producer, you constantly have to be thinking, okay, what is this person doing with their hands that I now need to say out loud so the person reading this transcript or the person listening to this conversation doesn't feel like they're having a secondary experience. So I walked into StartWell Studios today to tape a conversation with Geoffrey Hinton. He's known as a godfather of AI, and he's a Nobel laureate. He's the first Nobel laureate I've had on Smart Girl Dumb Questions, although I've interviewed lots of people like Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye and other really smart people as well. I don't think they've won Nobel Prizes yet. And I was just really excited to speak to him because I realized that I have so many dumb questions about artificial intelligence. I think I know what it is because I use it all the time, but because I use it all the time doesn't mean I know how it works. I don't know how microwave works, but I use it sometimes as well. One of the reasons why AI is so powerful is because they're all able to speak to each other. And I was just thinking wow, one of the things that sucks about being a human is that we're so individualized, and particularly in the West, we operate in this very self-referential, self-centered world. We don't even have this collective mindset. And one of AI's superpowers over us is to have that ability to talk to each other. So I'm how do we govern this thing if we don't even coordinate with each other?
So you emailed or called and said, hey, I need to come to Toronto from New York.
Yeah.
There's a guy I need to speak to on camera.
The godfather of AI.
And that's what we did, right? So Geoffrey Hinton met you at our reception, straight up to Studio B, and we started recording.
Yeah, and apparently your coffee is famous because Jeffrey's colleague Jennifer told me that she really wanted to. She said the coffee here is great. I don't know why it's this is becoming an ad. Can I just say, in New York City, it would be very hard in the center of town
right.
to have this much space, this quiet, yeah, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, you know, it's so funny because last night I was on, I think it's called LoopNet, just looking at like real estate in Manhattan because so many clients have been telling us the last few weeks, you got to open something in New York, open something in New York.
Is it bad real estate in Manhattan?
No, I mean, it's great. But you know what's very interesting is I haven't been able to find something that is like a 20,000 square foot standalone building that we can occupy the whole thing.
Yeah.
So if realtors are listening, you know, give me a buzz.
Even if you could, like, I mean, I taped my podcast in Soho at a loft, and I recently did an episode with the DJ Diplo.
Yep.
And like at some point he was like, what is happening? Like, is there crime in this city? Like, what's going on? Because you could hear sirens just like all the time, you know? And that happens in New York, even in studios. Like, you know, you cannot soundproof yourself totally in New York if you're downtown.
You can do it. Costs a lot of money.
But
you can do it.
There are some studios when I go into like a locked space, but they tend to be so small because you can't get that huge loft experience. And I like to do my show like where people interact. Like Bill Nye shows up and Diplo's there, Esther Perel's there, and Olympian Alexi Pappas is there. And like I'm interviewing doormen and they get to meet these people too. And that's fun for me, like that whole vibe of the day. You know, like that's
well. Let's jump into that, okay? Because I'm so intrigued. I want to do some of your career history, but I want to come to it. I think the inroad is what you're doing now a little bit. This whole podcast that brought you to Toronto and to us.
Yeah.
So the idea of a kind of a conversational video series, you know, about storytelling really and opening up audience members to the perspectives, but also the character of your guests. Tell me a little bit about like that. Is this something that you've been wanting to do for a long time?
Yeah, like I love interview shows. I know like they tell you actually if you're going to start a podcast, don't do an interview show because there's so many interview shows. Do a chat show. Definitely don't do a narrative show. Those are extremely expensive. Like people will tell you all kinds of things. I've covered media as a journalist. But I have a show called Smart Girl Dumb Questions.
Right.
And I started conceiving of it a couple of years ago when I was executive producing a show with Kara Swisher, who's a longtime podcaster, a former New York Times journalist, and a tech reporter. And so I used to executive produce and I used to be on air with her. And I would like write all the questions and do all this stuff. And then I at some point was like, well, I can just start asking questions. I was like sidekicking. I was on air. I was guest hosting. I was getting invited to do things. And I was like, well, I could do more of this. And I have my own voice and I'd rather ask the questions I write myself in my own way. And you have all that experience of a thing. But I didn't like, there's so many shows out there that I'm like, what is going to be different about mine? And I thought what would be different about mine was me admitting what I don't know. And that's why the genesis of the name, Smart Girl Dumb Questions. Exactly. Being confident enough to be curious, asking the questions that we all have, but we would like secretly Google instead of just asking somebody to their face.
Isn't that interesting that we live in this context where like, you know, social media should be more social, but people feel disengaged from the conversation and everyone's turned into like a passive watcher?
Yeah, I don't even know if it's disengaged. It almost feels like it's curated. Everyone feels curated. And so your life is curated, your knowledge is curated.
You feel that way?
I think that people...
Is that an American thing?
No, but I think that that's what the modality like requires. There's this crazy book called The Society of the Spectacle by this French philosopher called Guy Debord. And he says like, he imagines living in a world where everything is commoditized and we don't exist in reality, but we live through the images of what we perceive reality to be.
Sure, Instagram.
It's kind of like what he's describing, right? The commoditification of everything and like the visualization of everything.
Yeah.
And so I think that implies a certain amount of like, oh, therefore I want to appear X.
Sure.
Like if I'm a New York Times journalist, I couldn't possibly look like I don't understand how AI was built, but like I don't.
This is an interesting point because you're seeing a lot of media organizations, whether it's means to be able to stay relevant and fresh with their audiences, or looking to win audiences in new segments and new territories, do this. Where even The Economist, right, as of a couple weeks ago, launched The Insider. Have you seen The Insider?
I haven't.
So this is their whole approach to video, which is a clever approach but terrifying for them. I think that, you know, the editor-in-chief kind of has posted about this, but their whole team was really kind of like racked with this difficult question of like, if we turn the camera on us, firstly, it's a camera and they're writers.
Yeah.
But you turn the camera on us, what does that mean for bias and journalistic integrity?
Well, that's really interesting for The Economist because, of course, they famously don't have bylines, right? And they're one of those publications that has always been like, actually, I think there's a real market for it. So I'm kind of sad to know that they are doing a lot more video now, because I think that one of the things I think there's actually people don't necessarily want that. Like people want, I know a lot of people who are hungry for really objective, long view journalism, the kind that has been done at The Economist for a long time, as opposed to personality driven, opinion based, minute to minute to minute to minute to minute news.
Right.
Like I used to date this guy who would read the news twice a week. And I first was like,
that's an interesting thing.
That's crazy.
Twice a week.
A week.
What days? Were there specific days?
I think it was like Tuesday, Thursday. I don't know. But he would also watch Fareed Zakaria, listen to a couple podcasts here and there, watch Bill Maher. So there would be like sprinkling of other information, but really kind of like sitting down to digest news and information.
Twice a week.
Wasn't like minute to minute on Twitter. It was that. And I at first was like, oh, that's really like bizarre. Like but he was extremely smart. And I realized there's this kind of sense of everything else that's important will kind of reach me.
Okay.
Because like if there's a fire or there's a major event, like you're going to know about it, whether or not you're going and finding it on X minute to minute.
Right.
But the amount of information that we're putting into our brains, which by the way, I've just learned have a lot more storage capacity.
Yeah. Jeffrey just
just
schooled you on that. Right?
I know.
Billions of some things.
Did you know
how many neurons? I mean, the thing is quantity is irrelevant in like just comprehending the phenomenon, right?
Yeah. So he was like, our brains are a lot bigger, but we don't use them because we don't have enough time.
Yeah.
We don't have enough time to collect all the experiences that would fill our brain. But I think that, there's a lot of noise out there. And so how do you make sense of what matters? And right now we live in a world where there's just so much news that people are missing out on. It's amazing. Like what one person's headline is like another person's footnote / complete, like they didn't notice.
True.
I think the volume of work that news organizations do is extremely important because we have to like have that information and know about it and like keep it for posterity because like what happens today in Sudan will matter in a few months.
Right. Like the record. You're talking about protecting the record.
Yeah. About like the job of journalists as recorders of history and not simply stenographers, right? Like not simply just writing down what happened, but probing why that happened.
Sure.
Explaining like trying to put as much information to spotlight as possible.
And so how does this relate, do you think, to this current like want for edutainment content?
You mean the demand across the world for it, or even what I'm doing? Yeah.
Contextualize it as the world and then yourself, sure.
Yeah. I think that like I think people want it to be entertaining. It's always wanted, like we've always wanted to be entertained. Like we are storytellers and story consumers as humans. And we like things that are pretty to look at and fun to look at and make us laugh and make us feel things. And so that's not new. I think that the way I make sense of it is probably an optimistic one. I think that we are way more curious than our media or even our conversations reflect as a society.
Right.
And I think that like a lot of the explosion of explainers, like people like Harini Bhatt doing Today I Learned, or Cleo Abram doing Huge If True, or, a lot of these, or Johnny Harris's videos on YouTube, like people want to know things and they're making it educational, informative, well-packaged, fun to look at, well-researched.
Right.
And that's entertaining.
Yeah.
I also think that there's like a lot of work that isn't done in these forums that is important to exist in the world, including the work that The Economist is doing.
Sure.
But right now what you have is convergence where all of a sudden inside media organizations, like someone described it, I think Emily Stenberg, who has Feed Me, called it like the America's Got Talent or something searches. Like inside all these newsrooms, I think it's more like America's Next Top Model or American Idol, where we're like, who would be good on camera to talk about this? Like who can both speak about the thing but look cool and talk about it and not be completely scared by a camera. But at the end of the day, if like we all become projectors of information and like you have 8 billion channels in the world, Like who's watching?
Yeah. Okay. So this is interesting because it's about this idea of like, I think there's two things at least happening here that I've noticed in the last 5-6 years, right?
Mhm.
So on one hand, especially in North America, but let's call it a global phenomenon with the pandemic and increasing kind of screen time,
Yeah.
right? And social isolation. People have kind of, let's call it pushed to overconsumption of media for sure. And then with that perhaps is also this like, you know, let's say linear programming consumption decrease.
Yeah.
So as people have cut cords, moved to on demand, but at the same time, I would say it like this. This is funny because it came up in a discussion with someone who was talking about connected TV the other day, and it kind of blew my wig a little bit. But like for me, I'm used to thinking of on demand.
Yeah.
On demand being the new media experience for motion. So if you want to watch something, you're going to choose what you want to watch. You're going to watch it. You're going to have subscriptions across the wazoo. You're going to pay tons of money, more than you ever paid for cable back in the day. But you get the choice of what you want to watch.
Yeah.
Though recommendations and engines and everything on all these platforms don't necessarily enable that too well. So you're not constantly super excited by what you watch to the point where you're putting things on the shelf and you're creating your schedule for you as a curator of your own media destiny.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing in and of itself. But with this increase in screen time and this quick adoption for the on-demand kind of media landscape, I think there's been a confoundation of celebritization where, you know, people are increasingly associating their trust with the person on camera.
Yeah.
And this is, again, this whole like facts and journalism versus commentary and versus opinion pieces and perspective and shallow journalistic kind of like talking to cameras on YouTube thing.
But it comes from the same place, right? People want to trust something.
Right.
And so do you want to trust in institutions and data, or do you want to trust in individuals? And you could say, well, I feel like I can hold an individual more accountable than an institution.
Yeah.
Once an individual becomes very popular, it's very hard to hold an individual accountable, because maybe if you're one of their first 10,000 or first 100 on Patreon, you had a lot of power. But once you're one of, 10 million people who tune in a week, you don't really matter as much to that creator, maybe. Like, would require a benevolent creator to feel that way. I think it provides self-accountability in the same way that like my having a byline when I used to work at news organizations did, where like I would be very obsessed with checking my work because I never wanted to get a correction. I got one correction in my life.
Okay.
And it was that Bindi Bitterman told me she was 91 years old, but she was, or 90 years old, but she was actually 91 years old. And I couldn't blame it on
So you're
Bindi.
proud of getting your facts straight.
But like, because it's your byline, it's your name on the line. And you feel that when you're writing.
Right.
When you're a byline reporter, you feel it even more when you're like visually there interviewing someone. Right. Right. Because like, who didn't ask that question? Who let that misinformation slide by? Oh, it was you.
Yeah.
So you have to set up systems to hold yourself accountable, with the purpose of serving your audience. Yeah.
Now let's talk about audience.
Yeah.
So on one hand, there could be this like fractured kind of landscape out there where reach becomes problematic. Again, if you were an early YouTuber, you could get those few million people.
Yeah.
Because there were less people producing content. Now
it's very hard.
Difficult to get the access and then win the access. And the platform is set up against kind of the channeling of content, right? Like subscribers don't mean anything anymore kind of thing.
Yeah, because you could have a ton of views. And like, I mean, I think Stephen Bartlett from Diary of a CEO says like 24% of people that watch subscribe.
Yeah, he's always begging for those subscriptions, right? He's always been. It's like,
but because that matters. It matters to brands. It matters to a lot of ways in which you monetize your content. Sure. And also you can lose people. Like I follow people on Instagram that I don't know important things that they do. And it's like the algorithm isn't going to be accurate in serving me that information. But I have a sense that like now when you make something, like especially when you do something, if you're building something niche, you can, like if you're doing science explainers, I think it's still a great time to start on YouTube, because YouTube like really loves that science content and it loves that explainer format. It lends itself to animation and visualization in a particular way. If you're starting an interview, I think it's much harder now to do like what Joe Rogan is doing and cultivate that kind of audience and build it. Like even TPBN, which is a new, like they cover Silicon Valley like sports channel, like it just
Those two dudes.
Yeah. It's hard to get the
They're
scale.
like ticker tape at the bottom.
They got the ticker tape. They got all the brands sponsoring them. I mean, but it's hard to get that scale. And I think that
Even then, they don't have scale.
But you get fragmented scale, I think. Yeah. So like my show, there'll be certain episodes where I get like 50, 60,000 views on YouTube. And there'll be other episodes where I get like 200 views on YouTube.
Right.
And one of the key differentiators is like, if it's Neil deGrasse Tyson or science or kids related, it might do really well on YouTube.
Yeah. Discoverability pairs against, and who knows what the truth in all of this is, because it changes all the time.
But the audience is different.
Yeah.
If you have a broad audience, if you are constantly serving the same segment, then you can build on one platform.
Right.
If you're trying to serve a broad segment, like women and men and millennials and Gen Z and maybe some Gen Xers or whatever, then like whatever your content tends towards, some episodes will pop on YouTube, some episodes will pop on Apple Podcasts, some episodes will pop on Spotify. It's like there will just be, some people will only read it.
Yeah.
And
it's chaos.
And all of a sudden you have to be everywhere and it's exhausting.
It is.
Because people are like, you should make a Substack. And I'm like, with what time?
Yeah.
And what would be on it that would be different and interesting?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is the biggest question that like capital C creators are, kind of facing, right? Is leave aside your intent to want to like derive income out of creating content alone. But even if it's like a hobby and you're legit about, honest with yourself about that, and you're like, I'm just doing this for fun, to be expressive or to explore my own inquisitiveness on a topic or something. It's interesting. Like people don't own audiences. And in a way...
And audiences don't own creators. It goes both ways. In some ways they do, but not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the old idea of using new media to do push media is weird, because like let's say the Substack thing, okay? You get your subscribers on board and they're paying you a fee, which is great, right? So subsidizing your production costs and all that. But depth of interaction, regularity of interaction with your content, testing different formats, might be so micro niche of an audience that you don't know. And but it's kind of a good thing, because in a way, as long as you can get people to pay, you don't need to worry about what they're paying for.
But I think it's like what you use it for. Like ultimately, if I did a Substack, I would actually not, I don't think, start with paid. I don't even know if I'd have paid. I think consumption has also always been tiered. Like you used to pay for movie tickets if you really wanted to see the thing first, or you could rent it.
Right.
Or you could wait till it, there was all kinds of ways, windowing of content, the earliness of the access plus or the type of the access. Could you go to a live taping of a comedy show as opposed to seeing the theatrical distribution of that comedy show, as opposed to seeing it on Netflix, as opposed to seeing it when it's syndicated? I think that there will always be like tiers of those fans, and now you have to be in different distribution platforms for them, or platforms are going to change to give you access to all of them. And you're already seeing that. Like Apple has you can subscribe, or Spotify, the podcast now, you can have a paid subscription model where you gate certain content. So, but one thing that's really hard to do is community. And I feel like often like exclusivity and community are in real fight with each other.
Right.
And one of the things YouTube has done well that other platforms, including Netflix, haven't been able to figure out is community, the comment section, right? And then Substack got you closer to those people. Now I have their emails. I don't have to rest on the algorithm. I can email them and find them. You're going to see, I think, like Instagram and others helping you get those kinds of emails and data.
But I feel like it's all kind of like getting moot because of like digital overload, spam, fraud,
slop, AI slop,
all that. So it's really interesting, because I personally feel like, and again, I'm now going to go into this, like, let's talk about business.
Yeah.
But LinkedIn has been this interesting greenfield. There's problems with the distribution on LinkedIn, but because there's accountability, immediate accountability to, or I should say definition to who your audience is, your network is who you're speaking to, plus some delta if you open up your content to anyone.
Yeah.
But you can always expand your network, whether you can access everyone through your content, like 1/10 of your followers actually see your content. And then there's no question, like no one wants to spend time on someone's profile. They'll click into the profile. There might be tons of content. Like let's say I post something 3 to 5 times a week.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's video. So you can engage with it, like in the sense that it's entertaining, it's informative. You might be interested in all of it. But digging through it is not the UI of the app on any platform. They're not necessarily taking content and doing anything outside of what Facebook did in 2010. River of news vibes.
Right. The news feeds.
But it's not chronologically relevant content. In fact, a bunch of stuff, the majority is all like, most of it's like pseudo, like influence, like pseudo philosopher crap on LinkedIn. It's like the philosophy.
I actually don't spend enough time on LinkedIn to know. I think
deep with it.
Yeah. I know that people say that's a real growth area. And I think that's definitely true for like millennials, X, et cetera. And also professional content. My challenge is, and one of the reasons I wanted to do something independent, and one of the things around Smart Girl Dumb Questions was like, how do I talk to people I'm not already talking to? That's, I think, the greatest challenge of audience development in our time, and particularly for journalism or informational content. Like, there is a business model to make stuff for people who agree with you, and to further inform and enrage them at the same time. And that is like a really lucrative, high value proposition that exists.
Well, in the last 5 years, it's primarily been the people that could spend on ads to pump content playing that game. But the organic sourcing of the audience is the difficult question here.
I think that was happening organically through the algorithm. Forget the advertisers.
Okay.
I think that there was like all the people complaining about cable news who became pundits on non-cable news.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think that traffic was there, and there's ways to lean into the traffic. If you post something that has to do with today's news, if you post something that has to do with Trump, if you post something that has to do with, there's a lot of like, it's like really happy puppies and rainbows and really bad do well on the platform.
Yeah, it becomes this kind of binary opposition thing.
Yeah. So how do you create? Yeah. So how do you create something that's interrogative and new and different? And like, I really struggle with this, because if I have an episode with Neil deGrasse Tyson that has a certain built-in audience, et cetera, et cetera. But the whole value of my show is that you can learn from anyone.
Right.
So at the end of my show, I ask my guests, what are they dumb about? And Neil deGrasse Tyson says, I wonder how cranes get up there. And so I go out and ask a construction worker who's an expert in that thing, right? Because my whole ethos is that you can learn from everyone. But that episode is not going to do well, right? And so then I have to think of my formula. Okay, then I need 3 big names for every one non-big name. And I need,
But it comes back to that idea of what an audience is. And if your audience that you're buying from StarPower per episode or whatnot, stays, actually it can be developed in your own audience. It's a great question.
Yeah. And I'm just figuring it out because I'm 20 episodes in. And I think that it is true because, I did this one episode with 2 11-year-olds, and that had a similar level of views. And it's because the 2 11-year-olds, like, people are fascinated by how kids are interacting with social media. And it was different because you're not hearing a talking head. Like, Jonathan Haidt's work is extremely important, but you've heard Jonathan Haidt talk about the anxious generation, read his book, et cetera. To have 2 kids getting an hour in long form to talk about their experience and then tell me that they feel, I asked them, how does life on screens feel different to real life? And Sophie says, oh, it just feels so much more together when you're with them on FaceTime.
What?
Than real life. And I'm like, then real life?
You should interview my daughter.
Wait, and then
she's 7.5, and she's like, fuck that shit. She's like, if her grandma calls her on the video call, she's like, I don't want to see her, but tell her to come here or I'll go to her house.
But what about her best friend?
Her best friend? Yeah, no one. She doesn't like videos. She doesn't. It's a stupid thing.
Well, these kids said.
Maybe because I think that way.
Yeah, maybe but these kids said, and data would show more kids think that people, what Sophie's answer was really interesting, because I said, why? And she said, because when you're on screens with them on FaceTime, you're playing Roblox together, you're doing stuff. I mean, I think it will be different as your daughter gets older too. This is how these kids have been socializing, particularly in the pandemic.
A second screen. It's accessory to the action that you're interacting with.
But she said they're together and they're doing things together. But when they're in person with people, everyone's distracted by their phone.
Oh, see, that's worse. That's terrible.
So what she's saying is that, like, to really be present, like, we're physically present together. We're not actually physically present together, right? We're actually more emotionally present together on screens maybe than we are in our lives, because that's where our attention capture is. I also do think that there's like inundation. Like, I feel I've fallen behind on shows and I don't even want more stuff. Don't you think?
Well, I try not. Okay, so I'm particularly an outlier, I think, when it comes to this, like, participation in the media landscape question, because I don't I don't feel a need to consume. So then it's always a choice. And the choice that I make, I'm not 100% like a monk about this stuff, but I really try to either learn or be inspired by what I'm watching. So that keeps me, kind of gives me this lens on choosing what I watch. Now, of course, I don't always watch alone, right? So I'm watching with other people, and there's different purposes for different types of content. It could be to relax and turn your brain off. It could be to imagine something that otherwise, you wouldn't, with somebody else, unless you're reading the same book. And even then, that's a tough one. Book club. So I
book club.
yeah, book club's awesome.
Yeah.
So I think for me, I don't feel like, even with social media and stuff, like I have always abhorred notifications. I don't like anyone stealing my attention. So wherever I put my attention, I'm focused on it. I don't want anyone taking it away. I'm notoriously kind of making people angry by turning my phone off constantly. And that's just so I could focus on things. But also, I mean, part of that was, as a former music producer and, media creator, or even like coder, you need deep focus.
Yeah.
Otherwise you can't get the job done.
And you're not allowed noise on set, for example, or if you're probably recording an album, you can't do that.
So I think that way even about my media consumption. Where I'm watching something, I want to give it entire focus, And I also, this is another weird thing. I'm gonna put this out there. It's kind of a paradox, maybe, but I don't typically like investing in watching the evolution of a protagonist's life story. I never want to watch that kind of content.
Like a reality television, for example.
Reality television, or even, there's so many shows these days that play on this. Like, it could be a group of people, it could be a single person, but the discovery of that person's life backstory or story or the continuation, it just goes on and on and on. But it's about that person. You're saturating yourself as an audience member in that person. What they're thinking, what they're feeling, what they're interacting with, what they're learning, how that will set them up for the future.
Right.
For me, that's exhausting. But what I do like is dialogue, and I like conversation. So I like the I'll say it like this. This is why I love unscripted content, not the reality TV show side, but this like conversational podcast side.
Yeah.
I love it because there's spontaneity to conversation.
Yeah, I agree.
And honest, hopefully, expression. So you mentioned Stephen Bartlett, like, no shade on the guy, but it's exhausting to watch his content because it's riding the line of authentic and formulaic, but it always rides the line, which I feel like exhausted by when I watch it.
Because he optimizes it for production and for distribution, or why?
The whole thing just feels, it just always feels so produced. And like, I mean, look at the next steps. Okay. Now this is interesting. I think I don't know if I have not had any conversations with people breaking this down. Years ago, when the Diary of the CEO started, okay, first maybe 50 shows, kind of interesting. Then started getting more optimized for growing the audience and pairing with commercial sponsors and that kind of a thing. Okay. It kind of got less interesting to me. And then now, fast forward, I don't know how many episodes in that show is, but it's become a company that productized that show to lever into developing new IP and talent.
Yeah, Flight Studios, I think it's called. I'm not familiar with it. I don't watch enough to have a perspective on it. I mean, it's extremely successful, right? A lot of people rate it, not just in terms of its numbers, but a lot of people rate it as like, oh, my favorite show, like on their Spotify Wrapped, etc.
How many other shows are they watching? What else are they consuming?
Yeah, we don't know. I mean, but
that's kind of part of my critique of this, is that like the popular shows drown out everything else.
But I guess you don't need millions of people to watch your show to be successful. So I don't.
Success, it depends on your definition of what's the audience that you're trying to develop. And how are you trying to interact with them?
It's so funny. I think I didn't do a good job of this when I started, because a lot of people said to me, especially brands and sponsors and stuff, and like, who exactly is your audience, and really start from the audience, and you need to know exactly your demo, et cetera, and need to be targeted. But I started with a more creative approach, which is like, and that's just from me having been a documentary filmmaker, or even like being an editor in a newsroom as opposed to like a dogged reporter on a single beat,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
which is just a different DNA. I'm not saying one's better or the other, but
Right.
I was like, I want to make something that's genuinely curious. And part of making something that's genuinely curious is being genuinely open and curious about what it's going to become,
Of course.
with time.
Yeah.
Now, like, would I figure out a formula and keep going? Sure. But like, maybe, I don't know.
Right.
This is what I've learned so far. Like 20 episodes in, I've learned that I have 3 types of guests that work really well.
Okay.
And I didn't know that, but I have basically been able to group my people into 3 groups. And there's basically big names that I'm going to have a different kind of conversation on. So if like Mark Cuban or Diplo or someone comes on my show, I'm having a very different conversation with them, I think, than you're going to hear elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it is like there might be some personal dynamic of like, I kind of know this person, or there's going to be a riffing banter to the thing. Like Diplo and I trade shoes. It's like a kind of hour-long improv to the thing.
Yeah.
You know, with Neil deGrasse Tyson, I'm just like a completely dumb about science person, and he's untangling my brainwaves. So that's category 1 is like, but you know, Esther Perel came on my show, and she's someone I've known for 7 years. So I'm not just asking her for her theories about, like, we have a relationship. And
Sure.
so when she's telling me about the problem of women being single these days, she's also telling me about the problem of me being single these days. She knows me, right? So that's one category. Big names experienced at a kind of more horizontal level where I'm just like have a different relationship with them, I think. Number 2 is guests who are experts in their field, and they tend to be quite dry and deep. And my format brings out a certain levity in them. Like I ask a ridiculous question, or, you know, I'll have Paul Krugman on, and my whole conversation is about, I think we count the economy wrong. And he's like, give me an example. And I say, well, why do we use unemployment rate instead of participation rate, labor force participation rate? Because instead of telling people that, oh, if you are unemployed, you're worse than 96% of people, all of a sudden you can explain to them, you live in a region where there's a low level of labor force participation rate amongst people in your age group or demo. And I think it gives people a lot more motivation. So then he might say something like, well, the prime age male participation rate in this city. And I'll be like, Paul, but you're a prime age male. And he will not even like laugh or get it, but it's funny for the audience.
For the audience, yeah.
Yeah.
The audience feels like they have a seat at the table with you.
Yes. And that's what a friend of mine who's like a very famous director said to me. I love those conversations because I feel like if we're sitting at the table together, we'd look at each other and be like, and keep going in the conversation.
Yeah.
And the third is for me, and one of my favorite categories, if not the favorite, is people who never get an hour to tell their stories.
Okay.
And
the stories you don't hear.
And from people who have very interesting vantage points. So like 2 doormen that came on my show, but they're really social anthropologists.
Yeah,
like
because they see everything.
They see everything. When you come home and you think nobody is watching, they see the first few minutes of your life in Manhattan, you know?
Yeah, New York City doorman.
They know everything. And it's so fun. Like they talk about the doorman code, and it's just like such a fun conversation. And I also just like love the star power that they get of sitting in these seats, coming into a studio, sitting in these seats, watching a famous celebrity leave as they sit down.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of a beautiful thing that I like, but I wish I could do that like all the time sometimes. Although I like all of the conversations. I don't want to just do one. But I didn't go in having that as a formula, and I don't even know if that formula will always work.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that you have to experiment, because if you don't experiment, you won't figure out what you like doing, and your audience won't be able to see things that are different.
So I think this is a really good piece of advice for creators or people thinking of leveraging their kind of like, their talent into running a show and being not to use the nomenclature of the industry, but like not running a show, but like hosting a show. Right?
But like as a host in video podcasts, you're basically a showrunner, executive producer, and television.
Doing everything.
Because in your mind, you're organizing that conversation, right? If you don't want to make your team's life hell afterwards, post-production.
Yeah, it's got to be somewhat structured so there's flow. But this piece of advice of kind of saying focus on what you're interested in and who you want to have conversations with, audience will follow. Yeah. So long as the content's put in a place where you could be attractive to audience.
Yeah, as long as they can find it. Sometimes people can't find it. But I think the beauty, and I just had this conversation with Jacob Collier, who's like an amazing, called the Mozart of Gen Z, like amazing musician.
The Mozart of Gen
Yes.
Z.
That's what they call him. And
What's his hair look like?
it looks like a YouTuber hair. It's great YouTuber hair. And
Not like
colorful
crazy,
hair.
and he wears scarves. And
He
just
wears
looks
scarves.
Angry at people in the street for no
He's
reason.
definitely not angry. He's such a nice person. But like,
Mozart went loco, right?
we're talking about what an interesting conversation is. For me, like great interviews or great conversations are kinetic.
Yeah.
And they tend to be when people like ditch what they've prepared and are just so engrossed in the conversation, surprised, delighted. And like you as a host are just are just the first audience for that conversation.
Right.
That's a way to think about hosting. Like
I agree.
you're the first audience for that conversation. So what don't you understand? What do you want to know more of? What captivates you? Those are things that you could do. Now you could say, like, I understand what they did at Flight Studio or Stephen Bartlett's production company, and don't quote me on this fully because you should fact check this because I'm not sure. But one of the things I understood they do
She lies.
is that they had
Fact checker.
somebody has told me that they basically had people watching the episodes, and then they would have people click when they got bored
Okay.
in
So
watching the episode. They had
to
test audiences.
content. Yeah, that
I
makes
believe
sense.
that's like actually
They do all that kind of stuff
yeah,
internally.
you
Yeah.
find it, but like and what they
Whether
do,
that's a representative like group of people or what, but
yeah, they would
tell
get
us.
like some representative group of people, get a bunch of people to do this, and like click when they were super engaged, and I think like tap when maybe the answer was tap when they were super engaged.
Right.
Then they would edit the videos to like pull up some of the taps to the top.
Sure.
And also to cut out things where no one's tapping for a few minutes. Because when you make something, it's like, how do you get someone from minute 1 to minute 123 of a film, or minute 1 or second 1 to minute 1 of a reel? So you could be very data driven about it. Netflix is extremely data driven, and their most successful projects were often stuff that was like chosen by the
Okay, so now
they
this
saw.
is, what do you think of this? Now I forget which company was it that was like all the rage. There was this big long form article that came out in like, I don't know, not Hollywood Reporter, Vanity Fair, maybe, I don't know, like a decade ago. But it was about quants, and I forget which media company claimed in Hollywood that they had hired a backroom of quants, and they were taking this like new approach to calculating. This is pre-AI. AI was still around, but it wasn't what it is now. And they were claiming that they could basically calculate blockbuster magic. What was the name of this? I wish I had. This is one of those things. Where's my phone? I'll Google this shit.
Yeah. I don't know.
But the story in a nutshell is that, oh yeah, we have these like hardcore math guys that we hired from Wall Street.
Yeah, like Moneyball for Hollywood.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they hit the street raising capital to produce the slate. And the first slate totally hit. Like, it was great. Every title was 100 million plus on a $10 million production budget kind of thing, like 10x movies, which is good enough to go back and get more money from people. And then they raised $1 billion or something, and everyone believed in it. But it turned out to be Mechanical Turk. It was just that they lucked out on the first few titles, had the right teams in place, and then bomb. And then they find out that there's actually no quants in the back room. And it kind of like, this is that classic debate, right? Of like, now with so many variables involved with, let's say, producing quality, and then matching it against an audience that has appetite for it. And then the mixed kind of like monetization story that taints the audience perception of the content.
Yeah.
Which is a weird thing. Like even Netflix, right? Looking at like tiering your audience.
That's like, well, I mean, I even think like there's a Schrodinger's cat in it. Like you might say like, oh, that first slate, no one knows. But then once you feel like, oh, I mean, I think in our culture, there's a desire to be contrarian. So I don't want to watch the thing that you think everyone's going to like, because I'm not like everyone else. Yeah. And actually like what you see right now on like TikTok and social is that Gen Z in particular just have this like very unhinged content. Like stuff that doesn't make sense. Yeah, like your kids are saying 6'7". Like, what does 6'7" mean? It's totally absurd. 6'7". Yeah, exactly. It's totally absurd. So like, it's unformulaic, right? And it's like being unformulaic makes it interesting.
But this has been the like, I don't know, man. Cord cutters in the beginning love the like everyone who cut cords in the beginning.
Yeah.
When like Bourdain was still alive and on air.
Yeah.
Right. That era. were excited by choice, because choice for them meant your alt indie video library that you go to, on Friday, not Blockbuster, and rent the cool shit that your guy Dave behind the counter recommends, but also that are just inspired by when you're going through the aisles. And that was on demand in the beginning. As soon as Netflix lost Stars, that was a whole different era that kind of came about, and they started production. Because the assumption should be that they are using this data to create the content that everyone loves. The tricky thing is, I think it comes back to this like mass trend problem. So Netflix can create stuff that keeps people long enough to, like, no one's going to drop their membership if we keep them just happy enough, kind of thing. It's mediocre content across the board for the whole world now. But how much killer ass shit is there that's also representative of the micro niche?
Yeah, like K-pop demon, but some of it hits the mainstream.
K-pop was a Sony movie that they bought 4 years. It's been on the shelf for a few years.
Yeah, and then K-pop Demon Hunters became a sensation. But like, look, there's a big disconnect sometimes between people watching and people having a conversation. Like a famous example for this in television was Mad Men. When AMC was making the show Mad Men, I believe the ratings for Mad Men were not that strong, but it was a huge cultural conversation about gender roles and relationships, about infidelity, about
even the ad
money,
industry,
about the ad industry, about the history. And like, so I think they're like, capturing the zeitgeist is not necessarily capturing eyeballs. And then it comes down to, well, how much do you need to make? Well, you just need to recoup your investment across a portfolio of assets of things that you're making as a media person, as like a big media entity.
To stay and play,
Yeah, but you also want to win awards, right? That's been a big part of Netflix's strategy recently. Like, they want to win awards. They're still doing theatrical distribution, even though they have a massive streaming platform. Why? Because it matters to their creators to be able to win an award.
Well, I don't think that's why.
Why?
I think the larger play is that it's about kind of initially it was about industry
recognition.
Relevance.
Yeah.
That's one thing. So it was like, we're not a tech company, we're a media company, treat us as equals. Part of that is like because they want to play ball, right? They want to be able to acquire portfolio from other brands, trade. And then the long tail, like where it is now, it's just eating the whole thing. Now, who knows what's going to...
Yeah, but I think that one of the reasons I understand that they wanted to do it was because filmmakers were like, I don't want to go do a film at Netflix because if it doesn't have a theatrical distribution,
no one sees it.
I won't get it. So they weren't able to get the talent that they needed to make the content that they needed to power the engine that they needed to make to kill the beast or whatever it is, right? But like, I think that the editorial, what I'm making an argument for is like the editorial quality of your product still matters. Even if it just matters to the extent that you can attract talent to make the blockbusters, it still matters.
Yeah, I mean, the big screen value of content is important.
Yeah, they're not just making reality television, right? They're not just like, they could turn on and just be Bravo on, steroids.
Right.
And that'd probably be like a very successful world to be in. But they don't want to be that. By the way, I think one thing that I think that Spotify will or should buy like a Substack.
Why?
Because I think that how do you get new podcasts? You take people who are already like in a medium of creating content and turn up your engine of creating podcast content. And they're also like moving big into the video game. And I think ultimately like where media is going is big vertically integrated companies.
Well, the sad thing is it's all being footed by, this is my Silicon Valley critique, but like it's all a Ponzi scheme, and the Ponzi scheme has wiped out value across the chain for like original access to market. This whole problem that everyone has on YouTube of like access to audience and defining your audience, and how things haven't moved forward in the last 20 years for this kind of capability, yet we have amazing technology at our disposal, is really highly problematic, and partly responsible, I think, is the whole, let's call it the VC pyramid scheme. The problem of companies that pump so much capital or are pumped with so much capital to have a positive outcome for their investors when it hits the street as an IPO and they cash out, or an M&A. And then these cash-rich companies that, if they can continue kind of sort of existing, exist in this weird zombie state that doesn't necessarily justify how they got to where they are. And that can be in a couple different things. Okay. So I'll spin the flavor in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
You've got, on one hand, you've got Uber. Okay. Uber, what is it? And at the same time, will it ever recoup? How long will it take to recoup the initial investment that got it through to being public and post? I forget what the numbers are, but they're gargantuan, right?
I don't know how much they raise, but yeah.
It's ridiculous.
But they're in a better place than like other companies like, say, Rent the Runway or others that like who are valued, their market capitalization today is a fraction of the money they raised.
Yeah, but even Netflix, like all of these companies, like so many companies that have been on this track of like raise, go public. Right?
Yeah.
And then kind of like be able to sort of exist and then figure out revenues later or profitability later.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting because if you look at like what happens to the, now I'm not demonizing every venture capital funded company, right? Because there's a lot of capital intensive businesses that require not just to win market share, but to develop technology that can save lives and stuff, right? There's a lot of justification for the industry of venture capital, but too many times do we see companies come in, cannibalize a whole market, not care about, the stakeholders that they're supposed to be doing business with even.
Yeah.
And then call it a day if it doesn't work.
Yeah. I think that there was definitely like in that bubble of like, and I was in Silicon Valley at the time, I was studying at the time, but like that 2010s bubble that we saw a lot of companies come up, get huge. I worked at one, it was called Vessel, and they would window early access content. It was by Jason Kyler, the former CEO of Hulu.
Okay.
And then he went on to run Warner Media afterwards. But the idea was like to take YouTube content and put it for 3 days on this other platform.
Oh, right.
The challenge was that there was no community.
Yeah.
And so it didn't
So it just sits there but it doesn't connect.
And they didn't have an appetite to do original programming because that's risky, et cetera. And so instead there was these like, kind of minimum guarantees for creators that never recoup, right? Because like your audience is not there. The audience isn't there because part of the reason the audience is elsewhere is because they want to be with everyone else talking about the content this person's making.
Right.
And be in conversation with the creator and all the things that come with it. And that company raised $125 million and then was, I think, acquired by Verizon Go 90 or something and paid its money back to investors. But like, it's like, what is that? There's a lot of, I don't know how that math works. It's not my area of expertise, but I don't know how that math clears.
Sure.
And I think you're right. There's a lot of heavily subsidized companies that came in, could be killers in industries and wipe out competition, and then can charge at a ridiculous rate to become profitable over time, or to, that definitely happens in industries. I think the difference with media though is like,
lay it on me.
So like you're like, I don't know if it's a difference, but like when it comes to media, ultimately you have a sense of if something's good and you have a sense of if something's relevant.
As a consumer.
Culture has a sense of it. Like media is a business of culture. So it's not like parking spaces or laundry detergent, or maybe, laundry detergent. But like, I think there's something where you have a sense of if something is successful or not. And even if the business like is clearing right now, we could say cable news, the business is clearing, but is it successful? Is anyone feeling like they want to invest the next 20 years of their life in that business? Like, I don't know. I just think media is a different product because it's so infused in our culture and
100%.
People have like a general sense of the thing. And so it's harder, I think, to have these scams in media. Maybe you can rip off people's from money, but I think it's harder to
I think
rip off people for.
But the scale of the scam is so large these days that it changes the industry and controls our perceptions of what's possible. So here's a simple example of this. Like, as a technologist, right, who used to fuck with open source back in the day and done a lot of like media stuff all over the world, run record labels, run VOD channels, all this stuff. I would say that today's technology stack that can enable media experiences to be participatory is far more powerful than any of our primary ways of consuming media today. So what YouTube could be, literally in like, let's call it a 6-month coding sprint and not much money, could be phenomenal and change the way that we engage with video. Does that corroborate, or does that enable a greater propensity for them to charge and sell ads? against that content? No, they don't need to change it right now.
But they're doing something right now that changes it.
What?
They're letting advertisers contract directly, basically, with channels.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a whole rabbit hole there.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're looking at like.
I mean, YouTube gives you more data about your content than anywhere else gives you.
Sure. Okay. Let me backtrack a little bit because I don't want to go down this rabbit hole of like like how we could interact with media, how we could self-curate, how the algorithm could create super micro niche to let us dig deep into this biggest catalog in the world, because it doesn't do any of that, right? We'll park that because that's its own episode. Talking about YouTube and doing like
I don't know enough about YouTube. I'm learning about it.
I'd love to do like a full in-depth breakdown of what YouTube could be.
Okay. I'm not the right person for that episode. I don't know enough.
So we park that.
Yeah.
But just on this topic of the cannibalization of potentiality and where value comes gets put on shelf in the media industry. Like you look at a company like Spotify, right? So Spotify, I'm not saying that CDs were the best format, right?
Yeah.
But every artist who is on Spotify will tell you that they don't make any money.
Is that true?
100%. If you look at what Spotify did for the music industry in becoming, in the last, how long has it been? Decade and a half? Becoming the prime, perhaps it's a differentiated marketplace now because Apple has its own product and Google has its own. But for the most part, I think it's still like the fastest running horse in the race, right? And I think what Spotify has done to limit the income potential of media consumption on its platform, and then still remain the primary place to get access to audience, has turned most artists, into performing artists, whether they're designed to be or not. They need a roadshow to make money. And go to merch and expand brand opportunities for themselves.
Yeah.
So we've seen this kind of like collapse of margin on the record label side too, where distribution and its orchestration has been less profitable for the operating margin of the middlemen.
But it's so hard to know, like, compared to what? Because definitely compared to prior formats, but not compared to Napster, which was a prior format.
But Napster wasn't a business.
Yeah, also wasn't copyright compliant and all kinds of issues. But
they're not. It's not a good comparison, because what I'm talking about is Spotify's become platform layer. They're so big, they're platform layer.
Yeah.
So what's happened is they're platform layer and they're in market. They're not hacking the market for fun or providing illegal platforms for access.
No, they're by the book and doing the thing. But think
their buying power in the industry has changed how the valuation of content.
Yeah.
And
the business model, you're saying, of people having to go to
industry.
Yeah. Totally. But that's what platforms do, right? I just think that like the big change
would be profitable to the tune of not just the collateral damage of the prior methods of distribution and media formats, but to the livelihood, the lack of livelihood generation, just for the artists that list on the platform. Yeah. Like there haven't been means on Spotify generated from that company to create ways for artists to get access to income.
What they're doing in video podcasting is very different, because they're, I think, want to compete in video podcasting. So like the CPMs on video podcasting right now, and what you can turn on in terms of like if you're starting, I think sometimes to be really successful in media, you have to find the right platform to align with what you're doing at the time you're doing it. So for people listening or thinking about doing shows, like, YouTube was that X number of years ago. It still could be that for you if you're doing a science explainer or whatever, like, certain kinds of content. If you're doing daily long form content that's going to be over an hour long, or there's all kinds of reasons why. YouTube is still there's still an opportunity for discovery, because the algorithm on YouTube, I think the algorithm on Spotify drive more discovery than, let's say, Apple can do, where it's much more editorialized in podcasting. But like joining Substack when Substack was investing in people joining Substack, joining Spotify when people are investing in video podcasting on Spotify, like a lot of hits just come from like right time, right place. Like relationships and love, I think it's also true in media. Right time, right place matters a lot.
So your take on Spotify today for people looking for the primary channel to invest in as creators?
Spotify has been a great partner to me as I think about growing. Like, it's like, they have a focus on video podcasts right now. I happen to have a video podcast right now. And it has been a place where I've seen growth. But Apple also is a place where I've seen a lot of growth and where I had a built-in audience, right? Because I had done these other shows at the Times and New York Magazine, whatever, and Semaphore. And so I had some audience that already existed on Apple. And that was my biggest audience when I started. And it still is, I think, by a significant amount. But I think
with Spotify, you're talking about organic growth. You start publishing and organically you're getting subs on.
People are finding it. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, like, I don't know, the follower count is increasing and the discovery count, and, and part of that I'm sure is also like when you get featured, when like Apple's like new season of Smart Girl Dumb Questions, that does well. When Spotify's like shows you don't want to miss, that does well. Like they have more editorial programming than like YouTube has, for example. Right. But it also has to be interesting. Like they don't want to just promote. I don't know. You could say like they're just going to promote DOAC all day or promote their own and operated brands, but I don't think that's true. I think Spotify right now is a place of growth. I also think like whatever everyone is doing last is a bad thing, actually. It's like, I think like video podcasting right now, I'm like, oh gosh, I was talking about video podcasting in 2023, February. Somebody offered to do like a version of our podcast that Kara and I did, like the top and tail, where we would talk together for free. Like they were like, well, YouTube it. We want to cut clips from it, whatever. And I was like, this is great. I was so into it. And ultimately it didn't happen. But I was like bullish on video then.
Yeah.
And that was when all of these news organizations were cutting their video departments in the midst of COVID and 2022, et cetera. I was like, this is a show. Like people are going to want to know. So I think right now, like if you want to know where things are going, like look at hardware development, look at what you like to do. Like I actually think print is going to be chic again. So I think like if you actually like the Onion's doing a print newspaper, or, and Vogue is going to do, 8 releases or whatever with Chloe Mel. But I think text is going to become interesting again. But I don't know. This is my counterintuitive take, maybe because I just want to be a contrarian, like everyone who doesn't want to watch the blockbusters. But ultimately, I think do what you want to do 100 times. Like if you don't want to do a video podcast, don't do a video podcast just because everyone's doing a video podcast. Because once everyone starts doing a video podcast, people are just always looking for the next thing in our culture. So that's I don't know. I'm a big believer in like doing what you want to do. I also think the hardware is really important. Like
the hardware?
Podcasts didn't just become big because podcasts are so great. They'd been around like RSS feeds, like people, the early podcasters were the early bloggers in like 2008.
I started podcasting in 2004.
Wow. And you still have the same feed?
No, I killed that feed actually. I rebuilt it, but we had like hundreds of thousands of subs.
Why'd you kill it?
For my record label, Indian Electronica. And yeah, it was like people knew me all over the world. People knew the back of my head. I'd perform at gigs as a DJ, and I'd have people run up to me. They would just know me and be like, yo, Abdul Smooth. That was my DJ name.
Abdul Smooth. I love it. Well,
but I killed it actually when I started this venture. I was like, I just want to focus on this one thing. Kill the server.
I generally have a belief that you should keep your feeds and you should own your feed.
Sure.
So but let me say the hardware point. Yeah. Like the AirPods were non-incidental to the podcast boom.
The AirPods.
Yeah.
People listening in their own privacy as they walked around.
Yeah, at such high fidelity. Like I think the technology of a thing matters. Like if you want to build like what's interesting in a world of like Meta Ray-Bans, like I think you should look at hardware. And we as creators are not good always at thinking about like
super interesting
how people are consuming the content and how formats could explode in ways that we don't even think of. Years ago, someone said to me, you should build a news channel for kids on Roblox. And I was like, oh, that would be so interesting, but I don't know that I'm the right person. I wish I had done it. It would have been so smart.
Totally.
So I think hardware is a really good way to look at, but there's something else I was going to say, the back of your head. Oh, I also think like owning. So one of the things when I went out and I started doing this, I talked to a bunch of networks and I thought about incubating my podcast inside of a network.
Okay.
Because everyone said, how are you going to find audience? I didn't have like a public Instagram a couple of years or a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, I didn't have a public Instagram. and I didn't have a huge following. You know, like even now I'm like maybe at like 10,000 subs or followers on my Instagram, and like maybe 4 to 5 for the show.
Okay.
That 4 to 5,000 has been built up over just like since March till now, till November. But I like, people were like, you have to be in a network because how else are you going to grow? And the way you grow is by being on other people's podcasts and ads on other people's. But I was just like, I want to own my feed. And one of the things I think for creators is like, if you can own your underlying, you can always make a deal to distribute with someone else. You can always make a deal for someone else to sell your stuff. But if you launch your feed, you are going to own your content. You own your YouTube channel. It's a lot better. Do a distribution deal with a network, you know, but ultimately like you can take and walk. And one of the things I observed was working with these individuals who had like built a large podcast and then had to rebuild a large podcast, then had to rebuild a large podcast. And it took them like until they're in their 60s to own their IP. Like that's not, I don't think that's not the way you want to do it if you can avoid it.
I would add to this for the audience that might be considering launching new shows.
Yeah.
This idea of also micro niche, you know, like be micro niche, and also consider how we're dealing with a lot of corporate clients that are considering, you know, which we haven't really talked about at this table today, but like the idea of how brands can leverage media for business development or other, you know, strategic communications needs. And
even internal to their employees.
100%, right? Just little updates. Like this is what we're working on in the marketing department.
Yeah.
And so that's very powerful. And I think the idea of micro niches is really interesting if you look at it as strategic advertising. You know, you're publishing freely available content that gets indexed in the open web to speak to anybody. Maybe you don't need to speak to everybody, but if you need more clients and all you need is 1 per month or 2 per month for your business model, give them the information that they're looking for to establish yourself as a leader in the field using content. Like it just works.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is a good piece of advice. Though I always think like, who's going to consume all of this content?
You know what? People don't consume all this content. That's the misnomer, right?
That's why you think micro niche is good.
Yeah. I feel like people are overwhelmed by what they feel like is a whole bunch of great stuff. Then you start digging. Like, I don't know about everyone watching this and yourself, but for me, too often, again, I've already painted myself as a curmudgeon.
Yeah,
right?
it's like you really hate content.
I'm constantly looking, especially as a producer.
Yeah.
I'm always looking for cool shit. I'm looking for shit that I can't conceive. This is the issue, right? I'm looking for stuff that will answer my interest and pique my curiosity.
Yeah, incept it. You don't even have it.
Yeah, so I'm looking for really, really cool shit. And often cases, I just get fed formulaic crap, you know? Even like just scrolling through anything. So I have to, and then keyword searching doesn't work on YouTube. But you're Google, you have Gemini. Why doesn't YouTube work to look for anything? And there's reasons for it. But I find that, you know, difficult. So when I'm looking for content, I mean, this is the doom scroll kind of thesis, right? Is that people doom scroll because they're looking for something that's valid and relevant, and nothing is. So it's just dopamine, exhaustion, go to sleep. But this is it. I think there is great stuff out there.
Yeah.
Discoverability is a problem. But remember that, like, this is the funny thing. YouTube videos are indexed in Google.
Yeah.
So that's a great hack for anyone that wants to reach someone with what their video is all about, is don't worry about, like, the YouTube audience trying to find you.
Yeah.
Anyone searching for that keyword is going to find you if you're doing
But that's all going to change with AI.
Well, it will change, but it might not entirely go away.
But now you're having all this like AEO instead of SEO, or
so now, okay, like, and without rehashing the Jeffrey Hinton discussion you just had for your episode for your show here in the studio. Yeah. I think what's really interesting that people forget about is everyone thinks of information as functional.
Yeah.
And this is the primary thesis of moving, you know, from SEO into GEO, or whatever you want to call it, like search engine based indexing and information sourcing, is that anyone who remembers is watching this, they're going to laugh, who remembers facing Google's search box for the first time in like circa 2000-ish. And if you used any of the like web crawler or there were other boxes that you could search, but for the most part, they would jump you into an index, right? Google was different for like taking you past the index or making the index feel like you're actually exploring the whole web, because they had indexed the web, not just a segment of it.
Right.
And the early search engines were all curators. So like even like Hotbot, my favorite one from there was Lycos.
Hotbot is. Yeah.
Hotbot was wicked because do you know the history of Wired magazine?
Yeah.
Okay, so when Chris,
I don't know the history. I just like Wired magazine. That's owned by Condé Nast now.
Yeah, but back in the day when Chris Anderson was there.
Before Ted.
Before, huh?
Ted, Chris Anderson, who does Ted.
Different Chris Anderson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is the Longtail guy, I think.
Yeah,
he's written a couple books, and Longtail was perhaps his theory. But anyway, Wired was really cool. Wired used to do a lot more really cool content. Like it was awesome back in the day, and it was unfettered. It was an unfettered lens on tech and society and how they intertwined.
Yeah.
And they didn't really care about positioning the content in line with advertisers in the early days. It was just like, let's make wicked investigative kind of articles and talk about transformative stuff. So the old issues, if you can find them, are worth reading, like in the first 10 years of the magazine or whatever it was. But they started a search engine in the early internet. They're like, we're writing about websites, right? So this is the first search engines were actually magazines. So all the computer magazines would have an index at the back of the magazine that tell you cool websites to check out. I'm talking
I didn't know that.
1995 to like 2002.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they were already kind of indexing it. And there was two kind of predominant things. One theory was like, let's index it so people can kind of explore topics that are relevant to them. But then it was really blew people's brains up because they were like, well, how do we index this in a way that groups all this information into useful things? Is it the Yellow Pages approach?
Yeah.
Or is it we can have free semantic tagging of and clusters of information?
Yeah.
And so that was a whole thing. But then there was this thing called WebRing. And WebRing was a fascinating idea. WebRing was basically like you could create your own WebRing.
Yeah.
And it was an alternate to search engines where you're basically creating a path of discovery for users. So people would they could load your WebRing up from webring.org or your website.
Yeah.
And then click next. But the WebRing overlay, or I think it was an iframe at the top of the page, would stay with the whole click path. So everywhere you go, you keep going back or forward or click random and travel within the ring or expand into another ring.
What?
So it was a whole different way of like navigating through the web.
Yeah.
But in a curated way. And there was also a randomization thing. And the early web was all about socializing your discovery. So as a user, as you were learning about cool websites, you would tell other people about it. Like that doesn't exist anymore. But you would socialize websites.
Very interesting.
And so anyway, in all of that mix, it was really interesting that Hotbot was created. I believe this is all true. Created.
I have no idea. I'm just following.
As Jeffrey hinted, said we make up our memories, right?
Exactly.
I'm pretty certain that this is accurate. That the Wired magazine created a search engine because they were like, we keep talking about cool websites, and our readers might lose old articles and then never be able to get those websites again because that's what the web was. If it wasn't indexed, you couldn't find it. You needed to know the domain name, and you would type it. And people literally in the early days had pieces of paper next to their computer on the wall with URLs on it. Yeah. And you'd scribble it down. And you would really hope that cool website that someone told you about that you saw and you really dug, that you wouldn't lose the URL. The URL, the domain name was super important.
So which is why people still own them. Like I remember meeting the person who had bud.com and it was had deals. The marijuana industry wanted it. The Budweiser people wanted it. Right. It was sitting on. Money. I think so. I didn't follow up. But as you're talking about this, I'm just, as someone who is not familiar with that part of the early internet, I'm like, oh, there is so much that's yet to be in the future of how we consume media, make content, exist, and this idea of. But I think this idea of what's a destination, like a website, a destination, still exists. Right now, our destination is platforms. And yeah, I don't know. That's all I'm thinking. It's in my head because I don't understand what, I'm not.
Yeah, you
deep
haven't
in the world.
experienced what I was talking about.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting thing. I hope there is a recycling of this, let's call it like using internet-based technologies to create, flexible architecture for community, because that's really what it was.
Yeah.
And community could be about learning. It could be about connection and communication. But if you look at the tech stack of the early internet, for everyone who logged on to dial-up in the early days, that wasn't within the walled gardens of CompuServe or AOL or any of these like private networks that existed on the internet, they would have IRC, so that's Internet Relay Chat. That's a chat app that works just like chat on anything works today.
Yes.
Emoticons, all that stuff, that all came from there. So in the early internet, there was chat. It's not a new thing. There was file transfer protocol, ways of sending each other documents.
Right. There
was the web, but it wasn't everything. There was all these different kind of aspects of, technology they were all internet protocols and technologies.
Right.
But they sat as discrete. And then the web kind of became this like amalgamation of all these technologies. And we've just seen the recycling of this, to be honest. I think that the newest tech lately has been, in some ways, video.
Yeah.
Streaming, on demand, live. I mean, that's been around for a long time.
Live is so good. Live is the future.
But yeah, the funny thing is, like, I mean, you've been able to make Skype calls since '99.
Yeah, but I think there's something about live. I think there's something about like that humanity of the thing. Of
being in front of them.
Totally. Like my favorite thing to do these days is go to plays and go to theater and like see like a human exchange of art form. It's so rare. And I love doing these interviews. Like I do like sometimes I do a show at the Cellar where I tape a podcast at the Comedy Cellar in New York. And like, I love just being in the room with people. It's so happy. It makes me also happy because I also don't have to think about what it's like afterwards. I mean, someone else does the post-production, but I'm like, I just like showing up and having it be this one thing that happened.
Yeah.
And it happened in front of a live audience and that was it. But maybe that's just like a return. I guess was Friends taped in front of a
live audience? I don't know. It sounds.
I think there are a lot of there are a lot of TV shows that used to be though, right? Like, wasn't there?
Even SNL, right?
Yeah.
Saturday
There's something
Live.
special about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think this is it. This is where, I hope again that people that create content are thinking about audiences as what they actually are. Humans interacting with the experience of whatever they're watching.
Yeah.
Creating the pathway to make that interaction give you feedback as a creator, as a host, as a publisher, TBD on what platforms will allow what kind of interactivity.
Yeah.
But yeah, opening yourself up to it can definitely inform you creating better content because now you're speaking to an audience, right?
Totally.
And so lots of stuff down the pipe, who knows? And who knows how AI will play into video consumption as well.
Oh, I've been thinking like the AI podcasting is going to be crazy. Like, why wouldn't I, if I'm talking about climate change, like tape with a climate change expert and then green screen it and like make it feel like we're just on a melting polar ice cap for 61 minutes on the podcast. You know what I mean? Like, I actually think there's a lot that we can do.
B-roll, automatic B-roll.
Yeah. Or like just AI, like just imagine the first AI podcast. Like why isn't my episode with Jeffrey Hinton filmed inside of like a 1980s Watson?
Yeah, like sitting there with circuitry all around you.
It's just not good enough
inside the machine.
Yeah, it could be fun, right? Yeah. But so I think there's so many ways to do it, but there's nothing quite the technology around live and the potentiality for like live video capture that there's nothing as engrossing as when you're watching something that's exciting and electric and you're doing it with other human beings and then you can have a conversation about it. That's the best, in my opinion. So, yeah.
Thanks for taking time to talk about media, your experience as a podcast host.
Thank you.
A bunch of stuff.
Thanks so much for having me. I now have to go find your like old, what was it? DJ Smooth?
Abdul Smooth.
Abdul Smooth. I have to find Abdul Smooth videos.